Greetings once again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Some of you may recognize my guest, Talmadge Roger Varnado the third. With us once again. Thank you for joining us, Talmadge.
Good to be back.
That's good to have you back. We have been, if you've been following the channel, you know, and if you haven't, I'm about to tell you, we've been on a topic, been on the National Basketball Association topic as of late, and we're going to stick with that theme today. We'll be discussing our top 10 small forwards of all time, as we do with all of our top 10 lists. I do not know Talmadge's list. He does not know mine. He might have got a glimpse of my screen. He might know my 10 and my 9 by now. But
I got your bottom 2 or 3.
Okay. So we're going to be revealing that to you and to each other as we go. And as we've always said on our videos, these are simply our opinions. There's some great players that are going to get left off. Maybe we'll mention some guys that were hard to leave off as we get near the end. But these are our opinions, and we're going to state why we have these guys on our list and in which order. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I'll kick things off with mine, number 10 and number 9. Okay. Then I'll kick it over to Talmadge. So at number 10... greatest small forwards in history, I have James Worthy, 6'9", 225-pounder, played all 12 seasons of his career with the Los Angeles Lakers. He was a 7-time All-Star, All-Rookie 1982-1983, Finals MVP 1988, career averages of 17.6 points, 5.1 rebounds, 3.0 assists per game. In his prime, he was arguably the best small forward in the game, or one of them. There's a couple other guys later on that might get mentioned that were in that realm.
And one of them I'm sure we all know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you don't know one of these other guys, I'm going to wonder if you've ever seen a basketball in your life. But one of the biggest highlights, he won Finals MVP in 1988. That was on a team that had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, although admittedly not in his prime anymore, but also Magic Johnson. James Worthy wins Finals MVP. That's a darn impressive feat, I would say, for that time. And, you know, when you sustain 12 seasons, you average nearly 18 points and 5 rebounds, again, on a team with those guys. He was pretty impressive. I got him at my number 10. My number 9, I have Scottie Pippen. 6'8", 210-pounder. Played 17 seasons, 7-time All-Star. All-Star Game MVP 1994, led the league in steals 94-95. He was a member of the original Olympic Dream Team. He boasted career averages of 16.1 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 5.2 assists per game. Undoubtedly and indubitably, one of the most versatile players of all time.
Your favorite word.
Indubitably my favorite word. And my favorite Spanish word is indudablemente, which is Spanish for indubitably.
I think we figured that out.
Not that hard to make a connection. But yeah, Pippen, I would say, not even just strictly among small forwards, but I'd say he's one of the more versatile players of all time. I don't have him higher on my list because, in my opinion, he wasn't a guy that ever carried a team. He was great, and I will make this case, not to get off topic too much, but Michael Jordan never won a championship till Pippen came along and Horace Grant came along and Phil Jackson became the head coach. Not to take anything away from Jordan because they never won one without him either. But my point is Pippen was a great complement to that Bulls team. They didn't have a true point guard. He kind of ran the point more than anybody. That term point forward kind of came apart because of the way he played.
You're stealing from Paul Pressey, but okay.
A little bit, okay. I'll give you that. Paul Pressey did do some of that as well. But yeah, Pippen also an elite defender. Yes. He could lock people down. He could guard the 1, 2, and 3 positions. I don't have him higher because, once again, outside of playing with Michael Jordan, he was good, but he wasn't dominant. I think his career high points per game for a season was like 22, and that was when Jordan was retired. That's respectable, but when that's the peak, I can't really put him too much higher than this, despite how great he was.
And as a Rocket fan, I might even have him lower because when he came to us,
he wasn't even averaging 22 points a game. Well, the unfortunate thing, the Rockets at that time had some great players, but none of them were in their prime. Exactly. You had Pippen, you had Barkley come along, you still had Elijah Wan, Shaquille one time told Barkley, well, what about that big three you played on? Barkley said, what big three? You and Scotty and Akeem and Charles said, we's a bunch of old men past our prime. We wasn't no big three.
That's it.
I mean, he admitted it looks good on paper, but we weren't a big three anymore. All right, so there's
1.5.
They were a big 1.5. That's my 10 and my 9. Talmadge, why don't you give us your 10, 9, 8, and 7?
All right, well, number 10, our list match. I'm going with Big Game James Worthy. I'm not going to give all the stats because you did a great job of doing that.
Thank you for noticing.
Of course. The one thing I would say about Big Game James that you didn't mention is his name is Big Game James. And as you mentioned, on a team with Jabbar and with Worthy, to be called Big Game, that tells you right there they needed him. And also the big thing I loved about his game is his big hands. Mm-hmm. Because he could swoop that ball with one hand and that quick first step on the baseline. And no one could stop it. And he was a better defender than people give him credit for, too. So he is my number 10, and I'm glad we finally met.
I was going to say, that's the first time we've had the same number 10. And I'll say real quick about his defense. Because Magic was not a great defender, often Worthy would have to slide over and maybe guard. They would shift sometimes. Sometimes Magic would guard a small forward. Worthy would guard a 2-guard, and Byron Scott would guard the point because that was a better matchup.
And that was a big theme in Pat Riley's defense, too, in that he had players that were in that 6'7" to 6'9" range.
Right.
All positions to where they could just – they were the first team to really switch an awful lot.
Yeah,
and James Worthy was a big part of that. My number 9, and shockingly, I thought it would be higher than this when I thought of this list. Mm-hmm. But after I went through the names, I've got him at 9. But you could easily convince me he should be higher, and that's Mr. Rick Barry. One of the more underrated players in NBA history.
Yeah.
He did win a championship with the Golden State Warriors, so he does have a championship. He has the underhanded free throw, which I love very much.
And what's funny about that is, as awkward and unconventional as that look, he was like a 90% career free throw shooter.
Well, and most people will tell you that is your natural arm motion.
Yeah.
Just like in pitching. If you see an underhand pitcher, we're laughing at him, but actually that's your
more
arm
natural
motion.
movement.
So really and truly, it's everybody else who's doing it.
Yeah, Rick Barry was onto something,
Right.
And to my point, he shot 90%. Yeah. He was better than most people, even though you might laugh at him for tossing it like that.
No question.
Anyway, go ahead.
Granny shot is the Barry shot. Great passer, too. He doesn't get enough credit for that. Now, defense, I'll give you – I read his autobiography once, and his definition of defense was, if I'm a starting small forward and I'm guarding your starting small forward and I scored 27 points and your guy scores 25 points, I was the better defender. So that's his definition of defense.
As long as you don't outscore me.
As long as you don't outscore me, I was the better defender. So he is my number 9. At number 8, I'm going with one of the most, again, underrated players in the history of the NBA, and I truly believe this. I saw the tail end of his career, so a lot of this is just research and from what I've heard. Mm-hmm. But he was with a championship team many, many times, and that's the great John Hondo Havlicek.
Oh, yeah.
Good scorer, good rebounder, versatile player, longevity, and then he morphed into that 6-man role towards the end of his career. And they weren't really calling it 6 men back then. It was just he came off the bench.
He just wasn't starting.
But he was one of the first ones that laid the foundation of, okay, this is an actual role on an NBA team. And if you're going to be a championship team, you're going to need that 6th man. Because after him came the Bobby Joneses, the Kevin McHale's, those types of players.
So he kind of made it, to put it in, like, if we're in middle school terms, a cool thing.
Yes.
Like, it's not any shame that you're not one of the starting 5. You can still make a huge impact on the game.
Exactly.
If you come off the bench. Like, and Havlicek was, to your point, kind of the first person to show I can still make a huge impact.
Exactly.
If I don't start.
And he just reaccepted his role because he was a multiple-time All-Star, multiple-time champion. And he realized, okay, to stay in this league and to still serve a role, I've got to come off the bench to do it. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. And I don't think a lot of our younger viewers even know who he is. But do some research. Really good player. And he's my number 7. And then we go to, let's see, this going to be my number 7?
Okay, that was your number 7. I'll do...
Actually, that was my 8. I'm saying, do you want me to go to number
7?
I'm
so sorry. Yes, do your number 7. My apologies.
Our first modern player, I'm going to go with the great Kawhi Leonard. All I'm going to say is the claw, defense, and clutch. And when he's healthy, he makes his team an instant contender, period. That's all I got.
You can't argue. I mean, there's really no argue because he has proven that wherever he's gone. All right, so that was your number 7. I'll do my 8, 7, 6, and 5, and then kick it back over to you.
Okay.
At my number 8, I have a guy that is often referred to as the Truth, Paul Pierce. 6'7", 235 pounds, played 19 seasons, and as y'all have heard me say before, longevity is a huge factor for me. 10-time All-Star, All-Rookie 98-99, Finals MVP 2008, career averages of 19.7 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. Biggest reason he's on my list and he's where he is, 19 seasons and he averaged nearly 20 a game.
That's
Plus over
impressive.
5.5 rebounds. When you can sustain, he didn't just hang around, because here's my point. He didn't just hang around for 19 years, and the last 4 or 5 of them, he was sitting on the end of a bench cheering on his teammates. He was a contributor. Granted, his last 2 or 3 years, he did start to slow down. But when you got a career average of 19.7, you played 19 seasons, and he was Finals MVP on a team that had Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett.
Yes.
They were all great players, but Paul Pierce was a great player wherever he went. Even in his older years, he kind of transitioned into that mentor role to try to help younger players, but he didn't do it from the end of the bench. He did it on the court, still playing and still taking those clutch shots.
Still contributing.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and they're going to listen more if you're contributing.
Oh, yeah. If you're out there and they can see what you can still do, and you're coaching them kind of player/coach, even though from an unofficial capacity, yeah, that speaks a lot. So I got him as my number 8. My number 7, and we do have another overlap here, I do have Mr. John Havlicek. 6'5", 203-pounder. Played 16 seasons, 13-time All-Star, All-Rookie 62-63, Finals MVP 1974. Career averages of 20.8 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 4.8 assists a game. Talmadge said a lot of it with, I don't know if you said this specifically, but he was also a very good defender.
I didn't, but he
Aggressive
was, yes.
defender. Could guard the 2, the 3, probably even the 1 if he had to. Coming off the bench, making those plays. Great as a starter, great as a role player. Fit into that Celtics team and scored when he needed to, played defense when he needed to. And again, 16 seasons and he averages nearly 21 points and 6 rebounds a game. He's a heck of a basketball player. So I got him. Definitely got him on my list. And let's see, that was my... All right, I'm going to do my 6 and 5.
Okay.
From here, it did get tougher to rank them. As we go along, it gets much tougher, especially as I go into my top 5. At my number 6, I have Dominique Wilkins. 6'8", 215-pound, often referred to as the human highlight reel for his dunking prowess. He played 15 seasons, 9-time All-Star, All-Rookie 82-83, led the league in scoring 85-86. Career averages of 24.8 points,
Impressive.
6.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists a game. I'll be honest, when I was making my list, I didn't think I'd have him this high because a lot of my memories are the athleticism
Sure.
and some baseline jumpers. But I knew he was a pretty good scorer. When I started doing my research, I was like, man, he averaged almost 25 a game for 15 seasons.
Yes.
He wasn't just a dunker. Like in my mind and a lot of people's minds, you probably just remember the athleticism. When I really looked at his numbers and looked at how long he played, I ended up putting him at number 6 on my list.
And as he got older, he shot the 3 a little better. But keep in mind, when he first came into the league, the 3 wasn't really a part of anybody's arsenal.
Right.
But as he got older and he lost that foot quickness, he shot the ball.
He
better.
had to develop that outside
question.
shot, and he did. Never a deadly shooter, but to your point, he adapted to to do what he needed to do. So he is my number 6. At number 5, and I'm just starting to realize a lot of these guys had nicknames. We had Hondo and The Truth and the Human Highlight Reel.
Well, then I think I know who your next guy is going to be.
The Doctor,
Yeah, that's him.
Julius Erving, Dr. J. I do have him at number 5, 6'7", 210 pounds. Played 11 seasons, 11-time All-Star, 2-time All-Star Game MVP, League MVP 80-81. Career averages of 22 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 3.9 assists per game. Some of you may be thinking some of those numbers don't sound right, and here's why. He played several seasons in the ABA before, and this is the 10 best small forwards in NBA history. So if you put his ABA numbers, his points and rebounds will be a little bit higher in his total number of seasons.
If you put in his ABA numbers, he may be a top 10 player of all time. I didn't, but I'm saying
but
if you were to do
if
that,
we considered that, yeah. At the time he was in the league, every year he was arguably the best player in the league. He was amongst. It's kind of like we've talked about with Jordan and with LeBron.
Yeah.
They're so good that every year you have to say, well, who's the best players? Okay, well, we know Jordan, and then who else? Julius Erving was that guy for several seasons, and then Bird and Magic came along, and Jordan came. But they all revered Julius.
yes,
They all looked up to him like, okay, this is kind of the benchmark that we had to set ourselves to. And he was, very athletic guy, pretty good jump shot. He could jump, he could grab the rebounds. He was just a great all-around player. So that is my number 5. And why don't you go ahead and give us your number 6 and number 5 as well?
all right. My number 6 is Scottie Pippen. You brought him up earlier, and that's odd to me because I'm not the greatest Scottie Pippen fan in the world. I obviously realized what his contributions were. A defender, a passer, could score when he had to. He did gain a lot of my respect the first year Jordan left. Because the first year Jordan left, you mentioned he'd never carried a team. That's the one time I'd give some exception to that.
I mean,
the first
did,
year,
but yeah.
they were a 50-plus win team and a legitimate threat. They go to game, I think, 7 when they lost in the playoffs.
Yeah,
And
it was to the Knicks.
to the Knicks.
Yeah.
And he did carry that team. So now I'm not arguing your point. Though over his career, he never proved to do it.
Right.
But he gave us a taste of that. And had he stayed on that path, he might be even higher on my list.
I do concur. Possibly he could have been.
But enough about him. And plus, he's a champion. You can't take that away from him. Very versatile player, and definitely deserves to be on anyone's list.
I think so, yeah.
Julius Erving's my number 5 as well.
All right.
And as we've already talked about, if you include his ABA numbers, he might even be higher than that. So I won't go into some of the things that you said because you covered it really well. But what I will say about him, and I think you were walking up to this point, is Magic and Bird get credit for saving the league, as they should have.
Right.
Okay. But Julius kept them a league to actually save. Because
100%.
had he not been there, there would have been no Magic or anybody, because the NBA was teetering on.
Oh yeah, a lot
here.
of our younger viewers have no idea. The NBA Finals weren't even televised live;
tape
they were
delayed.
tape delayed.
I
A
still
lot
remember,
of games weren't on TV. Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game wasn't even on TV.
there's no film of it.
There's no film
There's
of
no
it
film
at
of
all.
period. So without him, there would be no league to save.
That's a very good point.
And for that reason alone, he's my number 5.
All right, so we have reached the halfway point of our small forwards list. We're going to take a brief moment to hear a word from one of our sponsors. Talmadge and I will be right back. Hello, my name is Montgomery the Opolis the Turd. Jack rabbits. What are they, really? Are they simply rabbits named Jack? And if so, then why? Why not name them Frank, or Jim, or Ebenezer? I have never heard of an Ebenezer rabbit. Only a jackrabbit. I am Montgomery the Opolis the Turd. And these are my thoughts. Have a good day! And we're back. You're still there. We're still here.
We're hoping that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Let's
We don't
hope
know.
he didn't tune out after the Julius Erving topic. That'd be kind of disrespectful to him and to us.
Right.
But we've reached the halfway point on each of our lists. Talmadge just gave us his 6 and his 5. I'm gonna do my number 4 and number 3, and then I will kick it back over to Talmadge. Again, we are discussing the top 10 small forwards of all time. At my number 4, I have my first current player, Kevin Durant. And while we're talking about people having nicknames, I may as well say the Slim Reaper.
Okay.
6'11", 240 pounds. I don't want to take too much time on this, but I'm not sure about the 240.
Right.
He just doesn't quite look like it. He's called the Slim Reaper for a
215.
reason. 215, I can believe. After a couple quarter pounders, 220, I'll even give him. He's played 15 seasons, currently in his 16th. 13-time All-Star Rookie of the Year, 2007, 2008. 2-time All-Star Game MVP, led the league in scoring 4 times. Regular season MVP, 2013, 2014. 2-time Finals MVP, 2017, 2018. And his 2023-2024 current season statistics thus far, 28.1 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 5.6 assists per game. That's current as of this morning. Career averages 27.3 points, 7.1 rebounds, 4.3 assists per game. So the first point I'll make, he's in his 16th season. His current season numbers are pretty close to his career numbers.
Yeah, no signs of
He's
slowing
really
down.
not slowing down. He's averaging a little slightly higher points this year than for his career. This is the guy that has averaged 30 a game. He could probably score 30 a game anytime he wants
Rolling
to.
out of bed.
Yeah, he could wake up and just drop 30 on somebody. Truly a very, very gifted scorer. I've, in the past, given him a little bit of a hard time for, but you don't really have a post game. But the truth is, with his height and his jump shot, he can post up on somebody from 15 feet away and just turn and shoot over them.
And he does.
He does. He doesn't have to be the Karl Malone, Charles Barkley forward. And he's so athletic, and he's got such excellent shooting range. Like Nowitzki was the first 7-footer that I saw that was like a 3-point threat. Durant, in my opinion, is taking that a little bit to a different level. He's around the same height. He can drill the 3 on you, but unlike Dirk, he can also pump fake and blow past you anytime he wants. So he's got that versatility and the speed. Pretty good passer. Not the most impressive rebounder, but considering he plays on the perimeter most of the time, he is averaging 7 for his career. That's actually pretty good. Sometimes you go 6'11". Of course, he should get rebounds. He spends most of his time on the perimeter, though, so I'll give him some grace there. Solid number for a small forward. He keeps playing, unless he has a career-ending injury. He's just going to add to his greatness. So that's my number 4. Here's my number 3, and I've already said this, but here's where it got extremely difficult. My top 3, I had to really kind of split some hairs to put them in order. So at my number 3, greatest small forwards of all time, from Fritz Lick, Indiana,
Mr. Bird.
Larry Joe Bird. 6'9", 220 pound small forward. He did play 13 seasons, 12-time All-Star. Some of you might be a little confused as why I've only got him at number 3. 12-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, 79-80. I don't like to talk about it because my favorite all-time player was a rookie that year, and Bird won Rookie of the Year. We'll talk about that maybe at another time.
Sidney Moncrief. No.
Yeah, Sidney Moncrief. I still haven't gotten over it. All-Star Game MVP, 82. 3-time regular season MVP. 3 consecutive years, in fact. 3-time Finals MVP. Career averages, 24.3 points, 10.0 rebounds, 6.3 assists per game. This guy was phenomenal. No question he's one of the greatest players of all time. I have him at number 3. I can't really point to any one thing and say, well, I have him higher if he was better at this. It's not a matter of that. When you hear me talk about my top 2, maybe it'll make more sense. Those other 2 guys, I have reasons for having them higher. But Larry was phenomenal, especially for a guy that people constantly said, well, he's not fast. He can't jump. He can't run. Well, all he did was outplay everybody for 13 seasons. Yeah, he wasn't the most athletic. He couldn't jump higher than everybody, but he still averaged 10 rebounds a game. He dove for every loose ball. He ran harder than everybody else. And he had vision and passing skills far beyond most small forwards.
Right.
There's like maybe 2 other guys, and we've already talked about Scottie Pippen. Pippen was more athletic. I think Bird had better vision. Bird was
It's not even close.
Yeah, I think, okay. I was just saying, in my opinion, Bird was far better at spotting the open man, and he could drop 60 points on you, or he could spot McHale and Dennis Johnson and Paris and these other guys. Really a team player. I guess the biggest reason maybe I don't have him ranked a little higher, he did only play 13 seasons. Now, he had some back injuries that slowed him down, and that kind of kept him some of the longevity. But as far as skill-wise, the guy's phenomenal. And the 10 rebounds a game, that's his whole career, or almost all of it. He played with Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. It would have been understandable if Bird didn't get that much rebound, but that's how good he was. he still averaged 10 rebounds a game with those guys. And for his career, it's not like he averaged 14 to 15 rebounds a game. Then his back started bothering him and he slowed down and averaged 6 or 7. Every year he was between like the 7 and 10.9. I think his season high was like 10.9 one year. He was always just right in that range, but he could do whatever he wanted. And we've talked a little bit, I know at least off camera, you and I and my producing partner, Chris Black, who's sitting over here, looking a little confused about why I don't have Bird ranked a little bit higher, I think. But we've talked about the legendary stories where he would just tell people in the midst of a game, hey, on this next play, I'm going to come off a screen, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to pump fake, take a dribble, and I'm going to rip one right in your face, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And then he would actually go do it. There's like multiple stories of him doing that. One of the best stories, and then I'll wrap it up on Larry Bird. One of the best stories I've heard about him saying that type of stuff, I don't know who this other guy was. It was some guy that was a rookie at the time, and Bird had been playing for a while. But some young guy was talking trash to him during the game. And Larry said, I was just ignoring him for a while. And then on the next possession, Larry launched a three. He said, I had no business shooting it. The clock wasn't winding down. I shot it way too deep of a three and airballed. And I looked at him coming back down the court, and I said, that's why I'm so much better than you are. The guy said, what, because you can airball? Larry said, no, because I can airball and stay in the game. Bet you won't try that. And that shut the guy's mouth. So that's my final point on Bird's greatness.
There's a lot of great stories about Mr. Bird. And if you did all that talking about Larry and he's your number 3, we got to see who won it. I think I know who they are, but I don't think you're going to talk about them as much as you talk about Larry, so you might want to change your list.
Just wait. Okay, so you left off with your number 5, right? Why don't you give us your number 4, number 3, and number 2?
My number 4 is Kevin Durant. By the time his career is over, he could easily be higher on the list. I think it's going to be hard to crack that top 3.
I concur, but
you can make the argument. I won't go into everything you just said because you summed him up fairly well. The thing I've admired about him the most is he is probably the most pure scorer I've ever seen.
I don't disagree.
In fluidity, in economy of shot, in length, rank. I guess you could say Steph, but because Steph is smaller, I'm going to give Kevin more
that's
credit.
The only thing I would say, because Durant can kill you from more spots on the floor more often
and
than
his
Curry.
height's going to come into play more. And here's the thing. Depending on it's a positionless NBA right now.
Essentially, yeah.
Depending on lineups, you can put him at power forward. Now, you don't want a bruiser going against him, but depending on who the matchups you can put him at. If you go really small, you can put him at center. Again, you don't want a bruiser at center, but depending on what the other team is throwing at you.
In today's game,
he gives you versatility. And the biggest thing I'll say about Kevin that people don't mention is the reason why Golden State won those series when he was on their team wasn't because of his offense, and he was great offensively. He was the anchor of their defense, even over Draymond, depending on the matchups. And people don't give him credit for his defensive ability. His thing is he morphs into defense when he has to or when the team calls on it. I wouldn't call him an every play lockdown defender.
Right.
But he can anchor a defense if he's asked to do that. He's a good passer, not a great passer. But offensively, he might be the most complete player. And I'll give him this too. People say this about a guy that's coming up later in our list, and we know who it is.
I think we both know who it is.
Right. But the expectations on Durant were from day one. Even at Texas, it was like
his freshman year at Texas, he was one of the best in the whole nation.
Exactly.
As a college freshman.
And the biggest compliment I can give to him is he's lived up to it.
He genuinely has. There's never been a point. He blew his Achilles one year and missed a full season. Came back the next year, was just as good. And he has, as I mentioned, he's averaging 28 a game this year. He's not slowing down.
He's not slowing down. So, fantastic player. Again, on any other list, you could make the argument he's number 1.
Oh, yeah. Some people might still do that.
No question. Especially the younger viewers that might not have seen.
Right, some of these other guys.
My number 3 is, my guess is your number 2, but my number 3 is Mr. Elgin Baylor. As I mentioned about John Havlicek and even, I believe, Rick Barry, it's funny, it's 3 people on this list.
Right.
But Elgin Baylor has to be one of the most underrated great players.
Maybe the most.
Of all time. I'd always heard the name growing up, him being a Laker. It's a little before my time, but of course you knew who he was. I knew he was the GM. I think the Clippers for years.
For a long time.
So I knew of him. I knew he was great. But when he died, I actually did what you're good at doing. I looked at his numbers and I'm like, why is this guy not considered a top 5 player of all time? They were astoundingly good.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that. And I don't know if you remember this, but when you and I used to work together years ago, we had a lot of these type of conversations.
Before you fired me?
Yeah. And we're still friends somehow. But that's not... That part's not true, just in case y'all aren't sure. But if we were still this good of friends despite that, that'd be an interesting story in and of itself. But I mentioned one night that I considered Elgin one of the greatest players of all time. And you immediately said, Jared, he was good, but he wasn't that. And I said, are you serious? And I was like, and I mentioned some of his stats, and you were like, you looked at me like you wasn't sure if I was right or not. I said, I'm telling you. So now you understand kind of what I'm saying.
That began my deep dive, but again, when he died, they were, of course,
they're
letting it. I'm like,
I
was way, because I knew he was good, but this guy, like I said, to put him ahead of Durant, that tells you how highly I think of him. And did you want me to go to my?
Let's go ahead and do your number 2. Yeah.
Well, it's Larry Bird. This was really close. And the odd part about it, you probably know who my number 1 is. If I were picking the 5 players I'd want to start on my team, I would actually pick Larry Bird in this position.
Really? Okay.
But I'm conceding that the number 1, you just can't.
Lock him into one position.
It's hard. And it's hard not. How can I be a basketball fan and not put this guy at number 1?
Gotcha.
So my number 2 is Larry Bird. A lot of things you already said. Again, I give him the reason why I put him 2 over Elgin and over Durant also was that intangible piece I mentioned. He saved the league.
Yeah.
The other guys, Durant might not be here if it wasn't for Larry Bird.
Right.
He saved the league. He played for a high-profile team that always had visibility. And the stories you mentioned, too, the lore kind of pushed him over the top. So Larry Bird's my number 2.
There's a reason they call him Larry Legend. There's multiple reasons.
No question. Over the hick from French Lick.
Yeah, the hick from French Lick.
We'll talk about that some other time. But, Larry Bird clearly skill-wise, big shot making, guts, carrying a team, 3-time MVP in a row, in a league with Magic Johnson in it. What else can you say?
Yeah, all great points. And one thing I didn't mention was the clutch shooting. Of every player of all time, if you need a clutch shot, he's got to be one of the first people that comes to your mind that you want to take in that shot.
Anybody,
he wasn't scared to take it no matter what.
Well, anybody you're considering over Steph, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't.
Well, yeah.
But anybody you're considering, that tells you how good he is.
Right. Stefan's a better pure three-point shooter, but at a clutch moment, you still have to, even if you settle on Stephen, you might still go, yeah, but what about Larry Bird? He's one of the few guys you would still mention.
He's one of the few.
All right, so I'm going to now do my number 2, and then I have a feeling we have the same number 1, so we may just kind of do a joint discussion. If you're a basketball fan and you've been listening, you can probably figure that out by now. My number 2 is the great Elgin Baylor. As I said, my top 3 were very hard to rank. It's splitting hairs. Chris Black doesn't agree with me. A lot of y'all may not either, and that really is okay. But here's what I'm going to say about Elgin. He did play 14 seasons, 11-time All-Star. Rookie of the Year, 58-59. All-Star Game MVP, 59. He once scored 71 points in a game at a time when there was no three-point line. Can you imagine what he would have ended up with had there been three-pointers? He still holds the record for most points in a finals game with 61. Again, without a three-point line. He put up career averages of 27.4 points, 13.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists per game. Very athletic, great jump shooter. The 2 biggest reasons I have him ranked so high and that I have so much respect for him. Number 1, he averaged 27.4 and never had a three-point line. The only other guys that are in that range career scoring-wise are Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan. They both averaged 30.1. After those 2, it's Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Durant, and LeBron that are all in the 27 range. So if LeBron,
we're creating pairs.
We're creating pairs here. If LeBron,
he's my new number 1,
or Durant, hard to argue that. If LeBron or Durant have even hit one three-pointer in their career, they hit more than Elgin had a chance to. So y'all might think that's a funny thing to fixate on, but I'm just being honest. For him to average 27.4 his entire career and never have an opportunity to even shoot a three-pointer says a heck of a lot. And then here's my second reason that I have him ranked this high and above some of these other guys. He also averaged 13.5 rebounds a game for his career. Y'all realize he averaged more rebounds a game in his career than Charles Barkley did, than Karl Malone did, than
My God,
Hakeem
Olajuwon,
Olajuwon.
yeah.
He averaged the same amount of rebounds a game as Dennis Rodman. Think about this. He was a Dennis Rodman level rebounder and a darn near Michael Jordan level scorer. Tell me somebody else you can say that about aside from Wilt Chamberlain, and then I'll say, okay, Elgin's not as good as this other guy. There's nobody else. If you look at points and rebounds, only Wilt Chamberlain has more impressive numbers. Elgin's like the next best rebounder behind Chamberlain and Bill Russell in history. Plain and simple. So he didn't have all the gifts that some of these other guys, like Durant was maybe a more deadly scorer in some ways. Bird was a better passer, and Bird was phenomenal. When I boil it down and say points and rebounds, and he never had a three-point line, and he put up these numbers,
It's impressive.
that's why he's my number 2. All right, so I believe we have the same number 1. So this is the first. I think this is the first of our top 10 lists that we've had the same number 1.
So you have Sidney Moncrief also.
What I was gonna say, full disclosure, I was gonna say name yours on 3, and I was gonna say Sidney Moncrief to throw you off.
Well, I can say this before we get to our number 1. That does bring up a good point. Obviously, Sidney Moncrief did not make our list, but
Yeah,
that lets you know.
let's talk about that.
That lets us know that we thought highly of him, and there were several. And of all the positions that we have done or we're going to do, I thought small forward would be the most difficult because I didn't think there was as many good small forwards. After doing the list, you realize I've left the Paul Pierces off my list.
Yeah, I left Rick Barry off of mine.
I left the Dominique Wilkins off my list. We both left Sidney off our list. Not that Sidney should have been there, but I'm just saying I respect him
arguable,
as a player.
yeah. There's
or the because he played some 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Marcus Johnson was more of the 3, but they were kind of interchangeable in that Milwaukee offense under Donnie Nelson.
probably the toughest ones for me to leave off. Well, I mentioned Rick Barry, but then the other 2 that were the toughest for me was Bernard King.
I forgot all about him.
See, and a lot of our younger viewers
And
don't
if
know.
he hadn't ripped his knee, he would.
I was about to say, before he blew his knee, he was as deadly a scorer as anybody in the league. Yes, including Julius and Michael Jordan.
Easily.
Before he blew out his knee, that guy could destroy you. And then the other one is someone you had on your list and eventually will be on mine is Kawhi Leonard.
Gotcha.
All the reason he's not on mine yet, I'm just looking at the longevity. If his career ended today, he's borderline good enough, but here's how I'm analyzing it. The amount of years he's played, also the amount of years he's really been a star. His first few years, he just did what needed to be done, but he didn't have to do a whole lot because they had Duncan, Parker, Ginobili. So I'm looking
And
at
Pop was the coach.
and Popovich managed So I'm looking at how many years has Kawhi truly been the Kawhi we know of today. Is that enough to bump somebody else off my list? I didn't quite think it was. Barring a career-ending injury soon, he will crack this list. I don't really have a doubt. And then there's even guys like Paul George, who maybe don't belong here, but
you need to
again,
mention.
somebody to think about. All right, so let's go into Sidney Moncrief or
Grant
LeBron
Hill?
James.
Oh, okay.
Grant Hill, without the injuries, would be on this list. Anyway, I'll kick it to you to kick things off with LeBron, and then I'll add whatever I'm going to add.
Yeah, it is King James. A brilliant player. The most impressive thing about him is kind of what I mentioned with Durant, but even more so with him. I mean, from high school,
Oh, yeah.
he would the burden he's had to carry, and he's done that phenomenally well. He's adapted because keep in mind, if you play in the league 20 plus years like he has, the league changes. Okay, now it might not change as much from one era to another, but it's going to change over 20 years. And he's adapted. He's been the leader. And people talk about him like, well, he's no longer an MVP candidate. We tell ourselves that because he's older. But if you were to take his age out of it and just look at his numbers and his production, every year he should be a top 3 or 4
It's
MVP
just like
candidate.
we talked about with De Niro and DiCaprio. He's competing against his own history more than he's competing against Nikola and Giannis and these other guys.
No question. And the passing, the rebounding, the will to win. And the biggest thing I'll mention about him is his biggest trait, obviously, no one gets downhill like he does. Even now, when he wants to turn that corner and get downhill, you're either going to get out of the way or better have some good insurance. One or two things are going to happen to you. So I could rattle off the numbers, and we all know what they are, but just he has set the tempo, set the pace, all-time leading scorer, and he's not even known as a scorer. What does that tell you? So just a fantastic player. He's earned the right to be called number one, and not only on the small forward list, but actually you could make the argument number one all-time, period.
Yeah, you really could. And he's in his 21st season, as Talmadge said. The young man's games were televised on ESPN when he was a senior in high school. That's unheard of.
And he was the first to do it.
I was going to say, at that time, it was laughable. The first time I heard that they was going to do that, I watched it because I had to see how good is this guy. Then I saw him play, and I realized he could score 70 against these guys he's playing against. But even then, he'd get 35 and still pass the ball a bunch. That's what really got my respect for him early on. Even in high school, when he could have just been scoring and dunking every time, he looked for his teammates frequently. So I was like, this guy is a smart and very unselfish player. Just to go over some of his stats, he is a 4-time regular season MVP, 4-time finals MVP, led the league in scoring in 07-08, led the league in assists 2019-2020. He has 110 career triple-doubles, 5th all-time. Here's one of my biggest things about him. He's the only player in league history to be in the top 10 in scoring, which is currently 1st, assists, currently 4th, and steals, currently 8th.
Wow.
No one else. Unless it was the first year of the league and one guy was in the top 10 that year, and that put him in history.
Right.
Once the league had been around for like 10 years, there's nobody that's been close. All the great scorers, they're not in the top 10 in both steals and assists. John Stockton has the career records in steals and assists. He's nowhere close in scoring. That's my point. Yeah. Usually you don't have one guy that does all that stuff. His season statistics for this current season thus far, as of this morning, 24.9 points, 7.2 rebounds, 7.8 assists per game. So to your point, yeah, he is still playing as one of the best in the league. Career averages 27.2 points, 7.5 rebounds, 7.3 assists per game. There's just never been a player like him. He's just big. Nobody's ever had his combination of size, power, athleticism, passing ability. Put it this way, he's Karl Malone size with athleticism that's not quite but close to Michael Jordan. Vision and passing that's not quite but close to Larry Bird and Magic. Nobody else has had that combination. Like him or don't like him, nobody's ever had that combination of skills.
And your favorite, you haven't even mentioned it, the longevity to do it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, too. He's in season 21, and he's not sitting on the end of somebody's bench clapping. He's out there averaging 24.9 points a game, 7 boards, 7.8 assists. So, anyway, those are our list. Y'all can disagree. Like we said, there's a lot of great players that weren't mentioned. You may disagree with our order. If there's somebody you think we left out or somebody else you really think should be number one, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about it because, hey, it's all speculation. These are just our opinions. Now, Talmadge, right before we wrap things up completely, I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Who do you think, if both these guys were alive in their prime at the same time, who do you think could throw a 12-pound bowling ball the furthest? LeBron James with his left hand or Anthony Mason with his right hand?
I'm going to go with LeBron James simply because I know Anthony Mason is one of your closet favorites.
It's not even a closet. I'm like, yeah.
And it gives me a chance to go against you. So
Okay. Fair enough assessment. Interestingly, I would actually say Anthony Mason. Both these guys were, big, powerful guys, but Anthony Mason just looked like a fire plug. I think if he saw how far LeBron threw it, he would just wind up and just send it halfway into orbit. He might not need to grunt to do it, but he might just because he could.
You made that sound and you have a cold. Imagine if you were healthy.
Yeah, imagine that. I'll bust out a better one maybe in some later episodes. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. If you did like the video, there's a like button that you could click. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. It'll enable me to keep bringing you this type of content and also alert you when new videos are available. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this week. For Talmadge Roger Varnado, the third, I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Y'all have a great week. I hope I see you again real soon.